Hello, everybody. Today we're going to talk about the new E7 that just released today. We're going to kind of through it, what's different, what are some of the additional things that are coming in, how this could potentially save you money, right, depending on what you're doing with that. And we'll walk through all that fun stuff in comparison. Today, you have two of us here. It's Chris. He's a field CTO in security, and I'm Mike Bloomberger, and I cover modern work, AI, and the data side also in the field CTO area. So let's just jump right into it. This is going to be kind of our agenda today. We're going to a quick little keynote, right, talking about why we're here, right, what we're talking about, where this could potentially be an advantage for you as an organization. We're going to get into Agent 365. Again, this is probably one of the biggest announcements, part of this, right, of why you would want to do it. Why would you want to do this piece? This will help kind of sort that out for you. We'll talk about work IQ. That's another piece that comes into play here with that. And then Entra Suite kind of updates to this that you get from kind of the base E5 piece of it. And then again, we're going to kind of compare and contrast the different licenses, and then we'll kind of close it all up. All right, so 1.3 billion agents is what they're calling for by 2028. And again, this is what essentially is bringing us into this conversation of talking about what is new in E7. Again, if you're getting heavy into agents, this is, I would say, almost a must for you, right? Because what this is going to do is kind of bring that, what they say is kind of the control plane, right? Of kind of a mix of understanding what my agents are doing, bringing in security and compliance on top of those things, right? And then wrapping it with the Entra Suite, right, with identity and access controls around that. So it's kind of bringing the whole security and what I would almost say visibility into your agents today. Right now, those things are kind of scattered all throughout the tenant, right? You're going to have some of it's going to be in the Copilot area within the tenant. Some of it's going to be in Purview. Some of it's going to be in the Power Platform administration. Some of it will be, especially if you've done something with Copilot Studio, directly in kind of that dashboard of agents, right? So there's a lot of stuff that's kind of a little bit all over the place, and sometimes it's not very visible to a lot of folks of where it is and how these things come into play together, or how they interact with them. And again, do we have the right governance? What is the visibility of this agent? What is it talking to? And then what this also brings in together is the idea that, right, most users want to kind of get down that path of having citizen developers with their agents, right? And kind of this is where this number is going. And again, this isn't just a Microsoft thing. You'll hear every LLM out there say, like, this is the year of the agent, right? Everybody's kind of going this route of, we're kind of graduating from just the chat element of AI, and now we're getting into whether it's a single purpose built agent that's just pulling customer data, or we're actually having that thing do something, or we're kind of going to more advanced to where multiple agents are talking to each other and doing coordination between each other to do said things. And again, this is really where Agent 365 comes in and shines and makes that a what I would say a frictionless kind of way of building, right, once you have those things in place. Oops, too far. Go. All right, so we're going to kind of break down these three pieces, right? It's, like I said, tracking, monitoring your agents. That's a big crux of this whole thing. Also putting in place the guardrails, right? It's one thing if you could just see it, right? That's one thing, but the other is can we put some guardrails in place, right? So that we're making sure that perhaps the right people are interacting with the right things. Kind of the example I'd like to give with this is, let's pretend that you have enabled a connection to some HR system, right? Um, you kind of want to give that ability to the HR team to go ahead and use those connections, get in there and create agents to help them throughout whatever it is, reviews or payrolls or whatever those types of things are that are pulling from their training. However, you don't want anybody else in the organization, say finance, to be able to tap into that connection into this HR system and extract, obviously, salaries and things like that, right? So it's kind of putting those guardrails in place. And then again, protecting your agents with sensitive data from all that fun stuff. So this is kind of again, the cool picture that goes to kind of talk on everything we're going to talk about today. Again, I'm going to talk about, Agent 365 and Work IQ. And then again, Chris is going to talk about the Entra Suite and those new security capabilities that are coming in here with it. And again, all of this kind of combined is what makes E7 E7. Again, we're going to have a slide at the end that's going to show kind of the comparisons of the different ones of what you get. Let's get into Agent 365 and let's kind of talk about some use cases and how this is going to play out. All right, like I said, available today. It's your control plane for your agents, right? It's kind of broken out into 3 sections, I like to say, right? Of with this, we kind of have our observe, govern, and secure. What does this mean, right? Let's kind of get into it. Like I said, I'm gonna give some real world scenarios on where this could play out. So we have our observe, right? Gain visibility into the agents. Like I said, today, not that you can't see the agents, but it's kind of scattered about, right? Things are here, things are there. Where do I have this single place, or again, the control plane, right, as a term being used? Where's my single pane of glass, my control plane to see all of these things, dashboard style, right? One place to go, get all that fun stuff to understand what's going on. And that's a component of this, right, of Agent 365 is seeing that, right? Seeing the agents, seeing things that they're connected to, behaviors within those agents and whatnot, so that you as an admin have 100% visibility into this from that perspective, from kind of that top down right look of that. Then the govern, right? I talked a little bit about this. I talked about being able to establish guardrails around your agents or even the connections that are part of that, so that the right folks are using the right thing. Again, kind of going down that whole path of agent, citizen, developer, right? The idea behind this, and like I said, Microsoft has said this, and so all the others, is that you're the agent. The idea, and I believe Microsoft said that there will be, there potentially could be 100 agents per employee, right? There will always be more agents than employees, because me as a single user or employee in the environment, I do lots of things throughout the day. And the idea behind it is that you put things in such a good control way, and the right guardrails and the right governance and the right security, so that you're like, here's all the rules that are in place. Now go ahead, Mike, you can go ahead and build all the agents you want in a controlled manner, right? I'm not going to be able to tap into things I shouldn't. It's not going to go and do things that it shouldn't, because those rules, those security pieces, those guardrails have been all put in place for me, so that I could just go about my day. And then again, from an organizational perspective, that I can go build, whether I build 1 or 20 agents today, that they're all going to be created in a safe and secure manner, right? That the company wants them to be in, based off of our policies and compliance. And again, secure, this is gonna, again, we'll be leading to Chris's part in a little bit, but this is where a lot of that piece comes in, right? Understanding, securing the agent identity, right? Again, agents are going to be treated like users, right? Within the tenant, to understand kind of that relationship with it, right? Again, understand, prevent, oversharing, any leaks, any of that fun stuff that could, possibly go wrong once they're doing that. And again, lots of customers are just trying to get their arms wrapped around this whole thing of understanding, I want to use agents, but can I do it safely? And again, this is where that piece comes in. So again, kind of to wrap just the Agent 365 piece, and like I said, I'll give a couple scenarios of where this could really work in a real world. But again, we have the observe, right? Think of this as the monitoring, right, of the agents, right, in real time. Registry, agent maps. Again, you're going to see if other agents are talking to agents, right? That is a thing. If you're unaware, there's something called the agent to agent protocol, where you can have several agents that all interact with each other. Again, analytics around that, oversight with, again, role specific pieces on that. And then again, the governance of those. Again, this is kind of crucial. Lifecycle management, audit, right? Audit and logging. I'll talk about that in a second with a kind of an example. And then again, secure, right? Making sure the data is secure, access to them are secure, and all of that fun stuff. And if you want to kind of, go down kind of a different scenario, or deploying ones and what that could look like, a couple real world use cases could be, like, let's say, take healthcare, right? Like a hospital system, deploying clinical AI agents, right? So they could go ahead and deploy this agent or agents, right? That, schedule patient follow-up, summarize, discharge notes, and, route lab results, and, all that stuff, right? That could potentially be either a single agent or multi-agents within kind of a healthcare or hospital setting. And what that could do on the back end, right? Agent 365 is going to give IT that single dashboard, right? They're going to see what each agent is accessing from that. Again, enforce any, HIPAA, all those other fun things that are in there, right? That have to go via the policies, and that's going to all be done via Purview, right? And then again, everything is auditable, right? Every action taken is auditable from that. So you're going to have all of this, and kind of the example is that if an agent tries to access patient records kind of outside of the scope, right? Then Defender can flag that and block it automatically as example. So again, you're kind of seeing this whole ecosystem, right? To where all of these things working together in conjunction are giving you the security, the governance, and all of the visibility into these things that you might be looking for within that. Work IQ. So we'll talk about this. There's some confusion with Work IQ in the graph. So Work IQ, what is it? Kind of how is this different from graph, if you will? As I like to kind of explain it, or if you can kind of visualize it, is I would say like, here's the Microsoft graph and Work IQ kind of sits on top of it. It's what I would say is like putting AI on top of the graph, right? And having it, make some decisions or some thinking, right, via AI, very much like we're using all the LLMs today, right? When I go ahead and ask Copilot to do said thing or whatever, it's going to go and think and do some things on its behalf that it thinks that are probably what I'm looking for or what I needed to do. And that's where Work IQ comes in, we like to say, it's kind of like the brain, right, of Copilot, if you will, and the agents, right, that really understand kind of your organization rather than just querying data, right? Because that's what we're kind of getting today, right? Is that if I say, give me customer X and tell me the information on that. It's more or less going and querying things from, again, my email and my OneDrive and that one SharePoint site and all that fun stuff around there, and kind of just pulling that together. And what this is kind of a layer on top of it, right? It's a semantic index that sits on top of the raw graph data, essentially, is what it is, right? So from here, you're going to be able to have that, what I would say, context aware of what you're asking it to do, right? So in my opinion, what you're going to get with Work IQ is when you're asking for some of those things, you're going to get a little bit more context aware, I would say, responses, right? Because essentially, instead of just kind of regurgitating that back in one piece, right, that you're going to almost have, it's going to reason over all of your data, all of your graph data around that said subject or customer, or whatever you're trying to do, and being able to kind of pull that up on there. So Work IQ, I think you're going to see a lot, what I would say, more intelligent. Not that it's not intelligent today, but I would say almost more intelligent, or what you would feel are real, like kind of bringing that stuff back to you, right? In what you would consider a response or kind of data brought together that you would want it to be, right? So it's going to bring all of these things, again, like I said, the context of what you're asking, it's pulling that data in, and just kind of putting like another layer, if you will, or an AI layer on top of all that data to make more sense of it, right? And I think that's what you're going to get. And I think a lot of customers are going to see a night and day difference in the responses. Again, not that necessarily the data is different, not necessarily that kind of the information it has access to today with native Copilot. That, again, that doesn't change, doesn't gain any access to it. But I think it will almost be more, I hate to say like, but more human-like of what you're trying to look for, right, in that. And it understands what your role is. It understands what you're trying to get out of it. And instead of kind of just a dump, it's more kind of driving you to what you're trying to, get out of that data, if that makes sense. With that, I'll kick it over to Chris, talk a little bit about the Entra Suite.
All right, thanks, Mike. Yeah. So the next item we'll talk about that's part of E7 and new is called Entra Suite. So this is a collection of new features within Entra itself that goes across a lot of different security planes. So we'll jump in and take a look at each one, kind of talk through some use cases, and then see how that fits in overall. So with Entra Suite, kind of taking a step back, Entra ID is kind of essentially the identity control plane, right, for Microsoft 365. So you have all your identity controls there, your conditional access components, SSO apps feeding into there, maybe some kind of base provisioning capabilities that are out of the box with Entra ID based on your licensing. But Entra Suite will take that to the next level here. So there's uh, 5 main components here that are called out. So even a new category of capabilities that Microsoft has introduced that they weren't necessarily in this category before, right? So there's 2 new features around what we call kind of secure service edge. You might hear global secure access as another term. So these are Microsoft Entra Internet Access and Entra Private Access. So this is a new category that Microsoft is in, right? So we'll talk through here in just a little of some of the use cases for this, how it might compare to some of the tooling you might have in your environment, and then kind of understand the capabilities around those. Then also Entra ID governance is one key piece of the Entra Suite as well. So this can introduce identity lifecycle capabilities, identity governance capabilities above and beyond the base Entra features that are available in, say, M365 E3 or E5 licensing. So we'll take a look at, some of the common terms are joiner, mover, leaver scenarios, and all the different kind of workflow you can have around that and automations. And then Entra ID protection is your risk-based conditional access components that are introducing risk into the way conditional access works. So if you have risky scenario for an identity or a login, you can prompt for MFA. Maybe you can prompt for a higher level MFA authentication, like phishing resistant methods. So it gives you the flexibility to not just have MFA all the time. It's another layer of risk-based reactive controls around identity. And then finally, rounding things off, we'll talk about Entra Verified ID. So this again is another feature of Entra Suite specifically. So this allows you different types of identity controls that weren't available again in Entra ID by default. So we have things like using your driver's license or a passport to verify a user for all sorts of various kind of use cases we'll talk through next. So at a high level, Entra Suite contains all these different components. Again, this was available before, but now it's included in E7. So we'll move on. So starting out with Entra ID governance, kind of mentioned some of the key use cases here. It's all about identity and access management, identity governance capabilities, really thinking through the full identity lifecycle and some of the tools within ID governance that you can use here. So we start to think about some of the workflows that are common of a user joining the organization, maybe moving between departments, and then finally exiting the organization, depending on the scenario. So you have kind of joiner, mover, leaver scenarios, and all sorts of different workflow that you can have within those. So let's say, for an example, onboarding an employee. We understand that they're joining the marketing department. They need to be added to very specific marketing groups that have access to Salesforce, other applications that they commonly use. Maybe they're added to other security groups that can help them access other systems. They're also sent various onboarding emails, even notifying their manager as part of that workflow. So you start to think through all the different manual tasks that you would have to do to kind of string all that together. That's where this can really help and completely automate from that perspective. So I can have a workflow kick off as soon as I know a hire date type of attribute is set in your HR system. And then that completely flows through the different connectors directly to Entra ID and kind of kicks off all these Entra ID governance features. So as that hire date is set, kicks off the workflow, provisions the user, provisions them into the apps that they need, maybe sends emails to their managers that they're joining, can send them a temporary access pass to go set up MFA. So all those manual tasks that you'd have to kind of look at, without this type of automation is capable. So all those workflows can have what's called logic apps, which are, you might hear Power Automate or logic apps. This is kind of completely customizable workflow, right? Like the sky's the limit with that, what you can come up with. So you can come up with some very elaborate components here, and take everything from your HR system, which might be, Workday, UltiPro, um, others, Oracle, right? Whatever the case is, you can bring that identity to Active Directory, to Entra ID, to your apps, to other locations, and keep that workflow throughout, that entire life cycle. So key product to being able to do that is identity governance here, which again is part of E7. So we'll move on to the next component here. So the two areas that I was mentioning, kind of call security service edge, are Entra Internet Access and Entra Private Access. First, we can think of Entra Private Access as a VPN replacement, right? It's a more advanced VPN replacement. If you have an existing, say Cisco AnyConnect or any type of VPN from a traditional sense, you generally VPN into kind of a separated network, and you have access to, potentially resources all across that domain or that network, where in reality, maybe you just need access to a single server when you're VPNing in, or maybe a single application. So one advantage here is that you can configure Entra Private Access to essentially provide that zero trust network access kind of model, where you only have access to that application and sorry, if you want to go back, only have access to that application and the ports that are needed, right? So I can say user A only has access to these two servers, and that's it, right? They can't even ping anything else on the network that they're already, into from a VPN replacement there. So that's one key security control there. But then it's also integrated with conditional access as well. So now you can really have conditional access controls in front of any protocol, any app, be it a legacy app. So it's even more so than just a VPN replacement. So a common cybersecurity requirement from an insurance perspective is to have MFA in front of your servers, right? There wasn't a good solution before this on the Microsoft side, and this is perfect for that. So I can have MFA in front of RDP to my domain controllers or whatever servers I'm administering, or I can even have it to SSH to a network device. So it can be any protocol, could even be a file share if you want it to. So it's seamless private access to your resources, be that applications, sites, protocols, again, those different types of connections. And it's pretty much a seamless agent that's on Windows, on Mac, on iOS and Android. And soon enough, it's actually going to be built into the Windows kernel and be even more seamless from that perspective. So think of Entra Private Access as kind of a VPN replacement. And then what's complementary to that is Entra Internet Access. So this is really securing Microsoft 365 applications at a new layer, and then also any SSO apps that you have in your environment that are integrated. So if you have, Salesforce, Workday, as we mentioned, Expensify, whatever it may be, any SAML application that you have integrated can take advantage of some of these features. So this falls into you'll hear the term like secure web gateway. Think of when we think of other like Zscaler, Palo Alto, Prisma, if you have tools like that, or Cisco Umbrella, it might be worth looking at what's possible here, right, and how that might blend into a potential roadmap here of looking at E7. So, and particularly internet access can consolidate essentially the traffic into the Microsoft tunnels. So endpoints everywhere around the world have the most efficient traffic. And then you can use conditional access in front of that to say that you can only come from devices that are using this connection and really lock things down. So it takes it above MFA, it takes it above even trusted devices that could really be anywhere. So say if you're at a coffee shop and you're not connected to internet access, or you don't have this type of capability, then you'd be blocked, right, from that connection. So an attacker from that scenario, this is a higher level layered approach here that revolves around zero trust kind of network access and secure web gateway capabilities. So lots of great capabilities. There's other even newer features like DLP that's being integrated, excuse me, and web protection at the base level, right? You can block specific websites, categories. So it really becomes that kind of overall networking solution between the two areas of internet access and private access to get you to further down the zero trust model overall. So go to the next slide. So the final area here is verified ID. So started to talk about how there's potential use cases for this. There's 3 that are outlined here. So maybe you have remote onboarding. Is how do you identify a potential employee or even a vendor in an effective way, right? Or even something like what's outlined on the right there is account recovery. So, do you have a list of questions that you ask an employee from your help desk perspective to prove that who they are? Those could be spoofed. There's social engineering. It's just not kind of meeting the requirements anymore, right? Not cutting it. So this is a potential use case for verified ID where you can have my driver's license proving that I'm that person, right? It's a driver's license, verified ID, and then Face ID connected to that of real time taking a picture on the device, whatever the case is, to also verify that other ID, passport, badge, different solutions that you can have on there. So it's becoming where another higher level layer to get you to zero trust, where some of the traditional controls and how you would do this around help desk or even onboarding just aren't as secure as you thought they were, right, from that perspective. So verified ID really rounds out the Entra Suite here, and you can kind of see, you'll have your base Entra features, as I mentioned, like conditional access. This really takes it to the next level, especially around identity governance. If you have potentially any existing solutions like SailPoint, Savient, other ones that compared to those capabilities could be cost effective to look at what this could bring as well. So that really rounds out the Entra Suite. Again, that's one of the main new components of E7 that's included. So if we take kind of a higher look at the licensing comparison, Mike and I on the Office of the CTO team are constantly having this conversation, right? Before E7 came out, it was E5, right? It's kind of do a licensing comparison. Maybe are you even taking advantage of your current licensing across these areas? If you have, say, Microsoft 365 E3, or do you have tooling overlap, maybe with security and compliance tools to E5? It's pretty much the same rationalization with E7 as well. So from a high level Microsoft 365 or Office 365 E3, we still see this every once in a while at organizations, right? This is just base productivity. There's no security controls around it. You probably have third-party identity providers if you're using this. There's no compliance controls or very base level compliance controls. And then you get into Microsoft 365 E3, which is going to be the same Office 365 E3, but now you have things like Intune for device management. You have base compliance features in Purview and also Defender capabilities. And then E5 before E7 came out was, the top license there that had full Purview, full Defender Suite capabilities, even Power BI, Teams Voice capabilities. So now when we're looking at E7, one of the key areas that Mike mentioned right away is agents, right? So when we think about, what's going to get us to kind of start to look at E7, agents is probably one of the key areas, right? Understanding your AI strategy overall, your Copilot strategy. Are you already piloting Copilot? Have you deployed Copilot? So when we break down E7 again, we have Above and beyond E5, we have Copilot, right? So if you're using Copilot, we have Agent 365, the other main component. So if you're already using agents, you're testing agents, maybe you don't even know if users are using agents, right? So like Mike said, it's agent sprawl that can happen. So getting ahead of that, if that's something that's part of your AI roadmap, right? These are Agent 365 is that visibility, the governance, and the security controls that will help you adopt that in an effective manner. Um, and ultimately, if like what was just discussed around Entra Suite, right? Those are all new capabilities potentially in your environment, or maybe there's potentially overlap with some of the tooling that you have that you can compare it to the Entra Suite components, and maybe there's a viable path to E7 where it makes sense. So that's kind of the rationale around the tooling, from that perspective. So again, that's kind of the conversation we're having every day. But if you break it down, all these components exist right now. So like Entra Suite, again, has been out for a while. Copilot, of course, people have been using. Agent 365 is brand new, right? But if you break down the licensing between each of these, you have M365 E5, which is $60, and these are retail prices, right? If you work with Microsoft and you're an enterprise customer, right, you can get different pricing potentially, but these are retail prices, for example. Entra Suite by itself is $12 per user per month. Copilot's $30 per user per month, and then Agent 365 is $15 per user per month. So E7 is $99 per user per month. So these separately add up to $117 per user per month. So you have a savings of 18 per user, right? So, and it's not just the savings here, right? It's going back to that rationalization, and maybe there's takeout of other tooling that you're using that can get you here as well, from that comparison perspective. So,
Sure,
um,
and just to kind of bring it all together, right, with this stack of what you're kind of getting, right, how it all works together, I guess I would say is Work IQ. Again, what we talked about, that's your intelligence engine, sorry, that understands your organization, right? It understands it, the agentic layer above that. Agent 365 is the governance engine that manages, secures your agents, right? Also bringing, again, the E5 security, productivity of Entra Suite and identity and access controls, and then also bringing in Copilot, right, as another piece to that whole plane. And again, that's what E7 is bringing, is all of those things kind of together, right? That what I would say is what we're seeing, right, with a lot of customers is kind of the challenges organizations have been, either trying to deploy, but they feel there's no kind of visibility into agents, or they are just deploying it very quickly, right? They're just letting it go, but now they're kind of taking that step back of maybe we got to see what's going on here, right? And kind of without those governance pieces in there to manage those safely at scale, right? That's a problem. And again, that's where this whole E7 comes in with, again, the Entra Suite, Agent 365, Work IQ, and all that fun stuff that bundles it in so that you can quickly deploy these things in a secure manner. Want to take us home, Chris?
Yeah, definitely. So, just a recap here at the end. We talked about all these different components in detail, right? The main components of E7 here. We have Copilot, we have Entra Suite, we have Agent 365, Work IQ. All right, all these components together make up E7. So we are here to help, right? Again, both Mike and I on a daily basis have these conversations, kind of rationalizing your current licensing, understanding where there's overlap, where it makes sense to look at E7 longer term. So happy to help, and thanks for your time today.
Thank you.